So, Victor, our last tragedian is Euripides, and I know that there's a lot to say about him. He's got really interesting plays like the Bacchae, showing the strangeness and hypocrisy oftentimes in human nature. So might be a lot that we can relate to our current political environment. But you don't have to do that. I want to hear about Euripides.
Well, we talked about Aeschylus and Sophocles, the two of the three great tragedians that survive. And as I mentioned earlier, there were over 200 names. It's just that the three were supposedly the most prominent. And they gave three plays in a what's so-called semi-comic satyr play, and then people voted on them, who was best. It was like the Academy Awards. Euripides of the three won the fewest. Only 4, I think, in his lifetime won the Bacchae post-mortem. And he has the most plays. Maybe that's why his reputation today is not as good. Wasn't in antiquity. We have 19 plays. And there was apparently in the Byzantine period or even earlier kind of a handbook of tragedians, selections, an anthology, and his survived in a way, not because they were more popular than those of Aeschylus or Sophocles. And he was almost a contemporary of Sophocles. You know, the Germans always said, in their history of Greek literature, they'd always say, Aeschylus, first generation, man of Marathon, Sophocles, Periclean age, Euripides, Sicilian exposition. It's decline. And because he was less patriotic, but he's very different than Sophocles. We talked about Sophocles and Aeschylus. He's interested in psychology, the human mind, for one reason. And so he's not using these ancient myths to represent necessarily major political issues, although he does. The genocide on Milos, when they killed all the adult Melians, he produced the next fall, the next spring, the Trojan women. And it's all about the women at Troy their husbands were killed. It was horrible, and they were enslaved. And it's a direct criticism of Athens, which people didn't like. The other thing about him is he tends to be interested in slaves, messengers, shepherds, and especially women, in a way that people at the time, especially Aristophanes, said was detracted from the noble male who ran the society. So you look at Medea, you look at the Trojan women, Hecuba, Helen. Got a lot of plays where a particular female character or characters is the titled eponymous play itself. And in those, I know that people said he didn't like women because they're all bloodthirsty, but he was trying to show you there that when you don't give women equal opportunity, then you should not expect them to be rational. That's Medea. I think that was in some ways one of his greatest plays. The end is kind of weird and flat, but the idea that Jason says to his wife, hey, you're kind of getting old. I know you helped me get the golden fleece, and that's ancient history, but we've got some kids, and you're just kind of a loser. You're a foreigner, and we're back in Athens. So you know what? I'm going to marry a really nice girl whose father's a king, and it's going to help me and our children. You should be all for it. She just, stares at him on stage and then says, okay, that's a nice idea, why she plans to kill him and the children. And she does. And another great play is Alcestis, and it's a very simple play. And her father-in-law has been told that he can live if he can find in a fixed time, very quickly, somebody who'll take his place. And of course, the son won't do it. Why? Has that great line? Do you think the sun doesn't feel good on my face, Dad? And yet she does, and she's volunteers. Hippolytus is a great play, and that is about a man. It's kind of Susan Blasey Ford, or not Susan. Is that her name, Susan Blasey Ford? Yeah, that he's unjustly criticized for sexual assault, but the truth is he didn't want to engage with Phaedra, and then he's damned and kills himself, and et cetera, et cetera. And the best of all, I think, is, well, the Trojan Women is very good. The Iphigeniaids is good. But the Bacchae is my favorite. That was produced in 406, the year after, 406, 405, the year after he died. And it's a weird play. It's about the coming of Dionysus from the east and the wine and alcohol he brings to Greece in mythical times. And he comes to Thebes, and it's kind of an uptight town. And there's the old King Emeritus Cadmus and the seer Tiresias, and they're looking around thinking, this guy is nuts. But he's able to make women go crazy. So we're going to kind of dress up like we're Bacchaeans. That means, you put on your fur and your cape, and you get a thyrsus and you shake it, and they go through. They're kind of like, I don't know, guys that are 70 that put on, leisure suits to look young as they did in the 70s. But the king, Pentheus, very young kid, is a teenager, and he says, he's a self-righteous, anal retentive. We're going to, any idea that there's sex, that you take women and you let them run around bare-breasted up in the mountains, and they get drunk and then they screw people. I know that's what you're doing. He says, no. And Dionysus disguises himself as a stranger. No, that's not what they do up there. I'm sorry. He goes, yes, they do, don't they? No, they don't. And so he lures him in, and then finally, you can see that this is all repression, that King Pentheus is a horny dog, and he wants to see it, and he's kind of a voyeur. So he says, well, to prove that they're doing these terrible things up on Mount Kithairon, would it be possible to dress me up like one of you guys? And then I could go look, and I could find out exactly if they are naked and having sex, and that's drawn out. And of course, he doesn't know that this is a trap to kill him. And so when he goes in there, he appears to the women who are frenzied Bacchantes as an intruder, and they kill him. And Agawi, his mother, kills him and cuts off his head. And then she brings it in, and then everybody's shocked. And then there's that one of the most famous lines in Greek tragedy. It says, God should be better than men, i.e. they're not. You're Dionysus, and you're an immortal god, and you have to reduce yourself to this. So that's what Euripides is trying to, that's what got him in trouble. That he played on, he questioned traditional Greek religion. He elevated people who were not part of the movers and shakers of society. He said what people say is a pretext. You have to look for their inner motivation. That was very popular among the sophists. That comes right out of Thucydides when he says that you got to be careful about the idea, the real reason somebody's speaking, versus the prophasis, the pretext. That a sophist will say, do this or this, or I believe it, but that's not true. People lie. They try to give you, there is a subtext to everything. And so he's a part of the sophistic late 5th century movement, and he's very popular. I think the French playwrights were much more influenced by Euripides than almost anybody. And today, if you're in a history of Western Civ class, beginning with Greece, and you got to your week where you're doing Greek tragedy, I think that you will probably, they won't assign the Oresteia. They'll feel it's too opaque or it's too difficult. Maybe the Prometheus Bound, it's very short and simple, but mostly they'll look at one or two plays of Sophocles. That will be Antigone, but most likely Oedipus Rex, Oedipus the king. And then when you get to Euripides, you may, I think a lot of people assign the Medea, Euripides Medea, they are the Hippolytus or the Bacchae. And he's really, Aristophanes, we'll talk about him next time, and the old comedy at Athens, comic playwright. And he, of course, was a right-winger, crotchety guy, and he says that Euripides was like Socrates. And if you read The Clouds or The Frogs, he attacks Euripides and the frogs and Socrates and the clouds as sophists, wordmongers that are trying to destroy the old morality. And he's writing during the Sicilian expedition and the last decade of the war, where Athens again and again could win the war. Finally, after all that death, and yet they'd blow it with a sophist, and we're going to kill all the generals who didn't save the sailors at Arginusa, even though they won the battle. That kind of stuff, and anyway, so he's looking at an Athens that's been humbled and weakened after 30 years of war. I should say after 20. In the last 10 years, he's writing about the last decade of the war. So he has a very less exalted, less Periclean, less confident Sophoclean. He's not like that confidence that you see around 440. I think his first play is 438.
Yeah. And so he's more cynical of human nature and of Athens' citizenry in general.
He doesn't think he doesn't think that as Aeschylus, you have to find the divine answer, what the gods would want. What's the moral thing that we have natural law? We're all imbibed with a natural sense, and that requires consensus and religiosity. It's not like Sophocles either, that is trying to uphold the aristocratic ethos in a radically democratic society. He's saying that there's certain people who are better than other people, and they come from old families and they have values, and they're challenged and they're not appreciated, and they're tragic heroes. And that's sort of what Oedipus and sort of what Ajax and Philoctetes are all about. And irony. He's Sophoclean irony. Just when you think you're right and you're arrogant, hubris strikes. So the idea that if you're hubristic, you suffer nemesis and then ate, or destruction. That's best outlined in Sophoclean plays. We talked about that last time. There is irony in Euripides, but it's kind of Alfred Hitchcock irony. So when Pentheus says, I think says Dionysus, he goes, well, what would you do to Dionysus when he's dressed up? I'm going to chop off his head. No, Pentheus, you're going to lose your head. And there's kind of things like that all through his plays.
Yeah, yeah.